strong today. Yes, very strong.
Hello, Gokuldas Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams.
Anuvats,
How are you doing?
I'm great.
Alright,
I'm in Radhikund, so I'm happy.
so today we want to hear your story. How you met the devotees, how you met your Guru Maharaj, the Vaishnavas, how you came to Krishna. Take it away.
That's a really long story.
Good.
So, I come from a very Vishayi background. I spent the first 18, 19 years of my life just wandering here and there, trying to enjoy my senses. When I went to university, I started doing engineering, but I had spent a year traveling before that, so it was very dry to me. And I decided...
The course, the engineering course.
Yeah, the engineering course was very dry. So...
That's amazing, that's strange. Engineering, that's the sweetest thing there is.
Physics and maths, it's very, very exciting. But I had some attraction for a girl that was doing architecture, so I decided to do architecture. But because I'd taken a year off, they told me that you have to go and do some arts courses first, and then that'll go towards your degree. So I thought, I'll do something I really want to do. So I was a little philosophically inclined. So I did philosophy, fine arts and English literature. And as the year progressed, the idea was that if you go engineering, you're quite smart. I wasn't doing very well in either, in arts or anything. And one of the units in philosophy, it was like Philosophy 101, was the problem of evil.
Okay.
And when I did my essay for that, I was looking at the problem is that if God is all-powerful, all-knowing and all-good, then why do bad things happen to good people? Or as my lecturer used to say, why are babies bashed?
Who would say that?
The lecturer.
Why are babies bashed?
Why do young innocent babies become bashed? So when I looked at that problem, I wrote in my essay that you have to look at good. So if you say something is good, then you say that means it is better than something else.
Yes.
And I think at that stage in my life I'd also developed some cornerstones of what I believed in. I believed in personalism very much. It was much better to go and talk to somebody face to face than pick up a telephone.
Yeah.
So this was like one of my ideas. One of the other ideas was not everything is relative. There must be some absolute.
Okay.
So in order for it to say something is better than something else, I thought there must be an absolute.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have to measure it. And there were some other ideas in there about, if you make everything less than good, then everything becomes one, or merged, or homogeneous. But everything is not homogeneous. So I was thinking philosophically in this way, and I wrote all these things in a paper, and then, I was very much into music and going to pubs and occasionally smoking marijuana and that sort of thing. So I'd gone to... we submitted this paper. I got a D.
You got a D.
I got a D.
Didn't like your answer for the
Didn't like my did not like my answer.
Wasn't compatible with the Western.
So,
mindset.
and my best friend, the guy I went to Europe with, his girlfriend, I gave her my notes. She hadn't even been to the lectures. She took my notes and wrote an essay, and she got an A.
Okay.
So that day, I'd been to the tutor.
Sexism in university, or?
No, I just went to the tutor and I said, why? I think my ideas are very good, and why is it she took my notes and wrote an essay and got an A? He said, because she wrote what we taught you. What you're writing is not what we taught you. You're not allowed to think for yourself.
So the indoctrination wasn't working with you.
Yeah. So I was quite a lot annoyed and disillusioned, and in that state I got a little drunk, a little intoxicated, and then I went to see Apocalypse Now, a movie. It was a free movie that was showing in the university that night. At some point in that movie, I was thinking very deeply about the concepts that I'd written in that essay. And I don't know why, but I just started crying really intensely. And I walked out into the middle. It was the middle of the night. And I remember lying in this great big court, very beautiful gardens. And it was a very clear night. And I was looking up at the sky and I was saying, okay, you're a God. There's a God. I know you're there. It was about the absolute, this whole idea of an absolute. There must be a God. So who are you?
Do you mind if I interrupt? What was, like, if you can say just in a few words, what was your answer to the problem of evil? Like, if God is all good, all-knowing, and omnipotent, as you believed, then how could babies get bashed?
Because the only way you can explain that is by the concepts of karma and reincarnation.
So were you aware already of this Eastern philosophy and these ideas?
Yeah, somehow the idea of karma reincarnation was very strong with me. And in fact, this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I remember as a child always having a consciousness that somebody was watching me. And really I was running around pushing life to the extremes. I can see that habit. I didn't think I was doing it consciously, but I was trying. One of the other things I wrote in that concept is if you push everything to the extreme, it comes to the same point. Yeah. You go extreme left-wing politics, extreme right-wing politics.
Right next to each other.
They end up right next to each other. And this is the same in everything, black and white, good and bad, everything. So there's a name for God. It means he in whom all mutually contradictory characteristics are resolved.
Yes.
There's a Sanskrit name for that. I don't know what it is now, but this is it, right? So that idea was there in my head, and also, obviously from previous life, I knew that somebody was always sitting there watching me. There was a Shakshi, and I was looking for that person, not consciously.
Okay. So when you were looking up at the sky that night after Apocalypse Now, to bring us back to the story,
I was praying, there's a God, that you're there, so who are you? And just at that time I had started a business taking bicycle tours around the southwest of Western Australia, and the government trained me in accounting and how to run a business. So one of the other guys who was on that business was running a record shop, and the other guy that was on the course was running a vegetarian shop. I was vegetarian. As soon as I left home I stopped eating meat. So he said, I'm just opening this place called Magic Apple, come to my place and eat something, and I was working in the record shop. So I went to the record shop and I went down to this guy's place. It was closed. And just the night before I'd been out to a band or something, and I thought I knew every place in Perth. I grew up there. My mother had a business in the city. And there was a kebab shop. So I went there to get my normal vegetarian kebab for dinner because the vegetarian place was run. So as the guy came up to me, he said, "What would you like?" I said, "Vegetarian kebab." So he took his knife that he'd been cutting the meat with and wiped it and went to start preparing my vegetarian kebab, and I was like, "Oh, yuck. I don't think like something." I walked out and I looked up the road, and like 3 shops down I saw this Govinda's Pure Vegetarian. And it was like, in the Harry Potter movies when
through platform 9 3/4.
Yeah, like the buildings slide apart, and it was like I never seen that place before.
The alley behind.
That's when they go into
Alley.
that house when it's like the safe house, the Harry Potter safe house that sort of slides open, slides closed.
So the universe opened up and showed you a different dimension, and Govinda's.
So I opened up and I looked inside, and I said, Hare Krishna. Prabhupada was on. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, and all the ladies were there, and everything was bright. There was lights and saris and very colourful food. With $5 for all you could eat. I was very poor and only had $3 for this kebab. So I walked away and I was like, I can't afford it. And then I was walking down the street and I found $2 on the ground.
Krishna
I was like, oh.
Govinda was like, drop it down.
So I took $3. I had $5. So I went back and I went back to the record store that night, and I was blissed out. And I think this is really important, because just at that time, this was like 1986, Bhavananda had just fallen down. And all of the devotees, they were his disciples, but they were offering to Prabhupada with sincerity. And that prasadam had potency.
He was the GBC of Australia, that area?
Yeah.
Okay. So you still felt Prabhupada Shakti there?
Well, I didn't know anything about that happening. But all I know is that I went back to the record shop, and I was so blissed out. Everybody was like, "Man, what have you been smoking? You're so happy." And I said, "I don't know, I just took this really amazing food," and I was like, and then it became like a ritual for me, because I worked there on Thursday nights. So every Thursday night I would go, and then later on I became a bicycle courier. and I was cycling like 25, 30 kilometers a day, delivering pamphlets or packages. And I would go there every day for lunch, and I would eat like 10 times what normal people would eat, and I would sleep under a tree, and then in the afternoon I was really strong because I had so much halva, particularly banana halva inside me. So this went on for like a year or so, and eventually like the police started chasing me and put me out of my job, and I moved.
The police started chasing you for being a
bicycle courier. That's another long story, but they filmed me on the television. What happened, bicycle courier became very big, and then they started running over old grannies on the footpath, so then the police started chasing, and I was the most prominent bicycle courier because I was quite strong and I had long hair. And
first most wanted bicyclist.
That was it. And I lost my car license, but I could still ride my bicycle. So it was a funny story, but in the end, so I had no job, and I went on the dole. I said to the police, I said, well, now I can't work as a bicycle courier, so I'll go on the dole. But then the Hare Krishna restaurant paid me $10 a day, I think it was, to wash the pots. And then they said, you know, if you wash the pots very, very clean, this will clean your heart. And through that association, I began to start chanting. So this period, 86, 87, 88. And I was into all these causes, you know, environmental causes, anti-nuclear causes. I had a place. And I made friends with the devotees. They used to come when I would sit there at lunchtime, and I would have philosophical arguments with them. I'd go to the Sunday feast. And I remember one young girl who was like 16, her parents went and got the police to bring her back from the cult, and then she got an order from the court, and she was allowed to come back to the temple. And the day she came back, she sat down beside me after the prasadam and said, "Oh, so what do you think of the class?" And the devotee who gave class wasn't very expert, so I started picking apart his ideas. But she'd only just was a very simple girl, and she'd read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and she defeated all my points. And I was thinking, I'm this like very intelligent philosophy guy, I'm at university, and I remember feeling smashed, had my ego smashed.
She had the as it is.
She was just repeating Prabhupada's words simply, and it was very effective. So I always remember all these little things, but in our preaching, how, like even until this week, I was talking to a young brahmachari, and they're so simple and pure when you first come to Krishna consciousness. It has potency. You can see how Prabhupada started this movement. And so other things happened. I remember one day I was in the environmental center, and the pacifists, the anti-nuclear people were fighting over the photocopier. And then I was sitting in an office trying to do some work. I was working on a thing about the forest, saving a section of the forest. And there was a guy in there smoking cigarettes. Yeah. And I was like, man, you know, you want to save the environment, you can't even look after your own office, your own body. So I was feeling a little annoyed. And when I walked out of the office, and I walked up to the corner, and one of my godbrothers, Gokuldas Prabhu, was standing on the corner doing books. And I told him this story, and he said to me, he said, why are you worrying with all these causes? He said, if you, just one person on this planet should become Krishna conscious, then that will have so much effect on everything, because everybody's consciousness will be lifted if one person becomes a pure devotee. So that always stuck with me. And then there was another devotee who's a cook. One day I was sitting up in the temple. This was towards the end before I left Perth. He said, why didn't you come and join the temple? Because I was chanting and I was looking a little more serious. And I think by that time I'd shaved my head already. I had a seeker. And I said, yes, but I had this big desire. I wanted to go around the globe by bicycle with no engines. Yep. I said, this is my big adventure. And he said, yes, that's okay, but you know, you'll get a much bigger adventure if you go inside. And he pointed at Srimad Bhagavatam, and he said, if you go inside Srimad Bhagavatam, this will be your biggest adventure. So I kept going with this desire, and we cycled like 4 months. We rode 6,000 kilometers through the desert in Australia. It was the most austere, horrible thing I've ever done. And in fact, just this I didn't tell you this, but just like a few weeks ago, we drove that road for the first time since I've ridden it, and there was a cyclist on that road, and I was telling my wife how austere it was, and she was also suffering similarly. So this is like a really tough thing. But what it did was that I had a Bhagavad Gita in my bag, and I had beads, and I was chanting. So we cycled to the north of Australia. That we went by yacht up through the top of Irian Jaya and like Indonesia, Papua New Guinea. I was with a Vietnam veteran, and he was completely messed up. He was on painkillers, and he was having crazy dreams, and we had to leave him. And we were climbing mountains and canoeing down these tropical rivers and doing all these crazy adventures. But at that point, I was reading Bhagavad Gita every day, and I just made up my mind. I said, no, I can do everything. There's nothing I can't do in this material world in terms of these kind of adventures. But I don't think I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to Mongolati, because I'd done that in the temple in Perth. And I wanted to read Srimad Bhagavatam. I wanted to sit and learn.
The real adventure.
I wanted to really take that real adventure. So we left Papua New Guinea, we flew to Cairns, we went straight to the Hare Krishna temple. There was a devotee there, Mandapa Prabhupada disciple. It was like the second last day before they had a house in Cairns. They shut the place down. But still, some of those devotees I met that day, like, they're all with Gurudev now. You remember all these people. And then we cycled from Cairns, like another 4,000 or 5,000 kilometres down to Brisbane. And I met my family. They were at my uncle's house for Christmas, and then we moved on to the farm that year. And the first thing I did when I moved on the farm was started working with the cows of Lagudi, ploughing the fields. And I think after about 3 or 4 weeks, it was very hot. It was just after Christmas time. It was very, very hot. So we went back to at lunchtime we would go back to his little hut. He had this little hut with no electricity, but it had like one little solar light and a bucket with some water and a tap from the dam. So we'd take bath, and then he went in and he would cut some papaya. We'd eat some papaya. And as I was sitting in his hut, I looked on his wall, and as my eyes adjusted from the light outside to the dark inside the hut, I saw this picture on the wall, and I thought, it's Prabhupada. And I looked. I said, it's not Prabhupada, it's somebody else. And I said to Lagudi, I said, who is that? And he said, oh, this is Srila Guru Maharaja. I said, oh, how come you have a picture of him on your wall? Who is he? He said, oh, he is Prabhupada for me. I only remembered that later. And then I said, oh, why are you following him? He said, oh, I went there with Prabhupada in 1976, and I used to go every day to Kaitagori and bring the water for Prabhupada, and there was these big ants, and there was scorpions, there was snakes, and I used to sleep under a pot. And he started telling me all these stories about Guru Maharaja, Prabhupada, Bhubaneswar. So I was like, it was like listening to Chaitanya Charitamrita. In my mind, I'm a very visual person, and I was just imagining, like, he was telling Lingaraj, Ananta Basudev, all of these different things. I was like, wow. So I'm just going to save up some money. I'm going to go there. So that year I went on, and then like in the middle of the year, Nimai Pandit Prabhu, Jagatpati, Parameshwar, some devotees returned from Bhubaneswar, and they just got initiated, took Harinam from Gurudev, from Srila Gokuldas Prabhu. So they said, Bhakta Granta, as Guru Maharaja called me, Srila Gokuldas Prabhu is coming to Australia, wants to come to Australia this year, so do you want to help with the airfare? And I took every cent I had, I gave them to them for the airfare. But it took some time. They made some arrangement. His visa wasn't arranged. First he was going to come to Perth. My mother got sick. I remember I had to fly back, and I was supposed to be. Guru Maharaja was supposed to come the same time as I went to Perth. He didn't come. I asked the Perth temple, and they said, no, he was delayed. So I went back, and then a few months later, we heard, yes, he's coming definitely. I asked, I'd been doing this program in Lismore. I was studying pottery from Papua New Guinea. I'd learned how to make pots. So I was going every weekend doing a program in Lismore. And there was a devotee there who was helping me. He used to bring milk. He had a dairy farm. So I asked him, and then he was coming and also helping me on the farm, cutting trees and making fence posts and arranging everything for the cows on the farm. So I said, will you come with me and take me to Brisbane? I want to meet this sannyasi that's coming. So he drove us to Brisbane, and we were there when Guru Maharaj came. I still remember this big door slid back, and Guru Maharaj came out, very simple, very humble. And that devotee, Tapan Mishra, he never lived on the farm, never followed any programs or anything. So, you know, like, if you see how he got initiated, just so many mystical things happened. But I know that was Guru Maharaj's Kripa Drishti. As soon as he gave mercy to everybody that was there, because everybody that was there doing kirtan when he came, they all followed him. And he went back to the Brisbane temple, and he was so, like what I'd heard, I had this conception of this big acharya, and he was so simple and humble, and he was walking and just laughing and very jolly and touching the children, tapping the children with his cane. I thought, he doesn't seem very like I was imagining. And then he came down into the temple room in Brisbane in the evening, and he was going to give Bhagavad Gita class. So he sat on the Vyasasan, as Guru Maharaj used to put the cane, sit, pull his dhoti up, take the kachal, this one. Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Bihari. You know, he does like this. So we all, in ISKCON, so, Jaya Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Guru Maharaj stopped. And he looked and he said, do you know what acharya is? Do you know what acharya means? Acharya means, I lead, you follow.
There you go. When they give Harikatha, it's different, you know, I guess.
But the power.
Personality manifests.
The power. It's just like...
Simple, this is what acharya is.
Yeah. The first thing he said, the first thing I heard him say on the asana was, do you know what acharya means? I lead, you follow. And then
he continued the kirtan.
And then he took again, and everybody was like following. It's like every intonation that he was making, like, well, immediately everybody was following him. And then he started quoting verses, and he points at me and he says, "Do you know this verse? Do you know this verse? What is your name?" I said, "Bhakta Grant." And he goes, I was wearing saffron. So in this process, when I joined the temple, I had a girlfriend, and then we split up. And then first I went to the guest house, which was run by Giridhari's parents. So I had lunch with him when he was a young boy. And then after a few days, they said, you cannot stay in the guest house, you have to go to the brahmacharya ashram. But there was no brahmacharis, because they can't keep brahmacharis. So I went to the brahmacharya ashram, and I was staying there. And then I used to go every weekend to do this program I spoke about in Lismore. And one weekend I came back, all my cloth had been dyed saffron. So Ramai Swami had come with his travelling Sankirtan bus, and some brahmacharis had come, and I was in the brahmacharya ashram, so you have to be in saffron. So I was sitting in front of Guru Maharaj in saffron, and he said, "What is your name?" I said, "Bhakta Grunt." And he was like, "Bhakta Grunta?" And I said, "No, Bhakta Grunt. Oh, he's a new..." And then Nimai called out, "Oh, Guru Maharaj, he is a new Bhakta. He's new. He's not initiated." And Guru Maharaj said, "Oh, new Bhakta. You put a stamp on his head. He's new Bhakta." So then the whole rest of the class, "Hey, new Bhakta." And he just started getting on my case. And he was hammering me, and this went on for some time. And then I had a darshan with Guru Maharaj, just a few things. I was really attracted. I remember we went to Jaya Dharma's house, one Prabhupada disciple's house, and he gave a class there for 3 hours on Chaitanya Charitamrita, and my mind was completely blown. I was just completely in awe of him, his Harikatha. So nectarian, so like my heart would spin. But then I had joined with this girl, and she was living in the Brisbane temple, so I had not seen her for 6 months. And then my mind got really disturbed. So Nimai Pandit was very fond of controlling people. So he was saying, "No, you can't have another darshan, you can't have another darshan." I was like, "Prabhu, I'm like suicidal. I need to see Maharaj. So I'd written on a paper all of the things that were disturbing my mind. And I went into Guru Maharaj, and he was sitting on the thing, and Chaitanya Chanda was sitting beside him, and he said, what is your problem? I said, well, I joined the temple with my girlfriend, and now my girlfriend's here, and I'm not sure if I should marry her or not, and this and that. And I just remember Guru Maharaj like looking at me, because I'm wearing saffron, right? Yeah. So I had no conception, even up until Srila Gokuldas Maharaj left, I had no conception that saffron meant you have taken a vow for lifelong celibacy. Yeah. I thought it just meant you're a brahmachari, right? So Guru Maharaj said, are you a brahmachari? And I said, no. And he looked at Chaitanya Chanda, then he looked at me, and he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, they put me in saffron, but I never wanted to be a brahmachari. And he said, but you're living in the brahmachari ashram. I said, yes, I'm living in the brahmachari ashram. And he said, okay. He said, then this thing, the moment this idea comes in your head that I want to marry, I want to be with a girl, you chant, Hare Krishna! And he just screamed at me. Hare Krishna! Kick it out of your head. Don't let that thing. That moment is the most dangerous moment in your life. So chant Hare Krishna. And I was like, okay, Gurudev. I said, Maharaj, okay. And then he said, and then he cocked his head like this, and his eyes went very, very deep and black. And he looked at me and he said, the only thing you really need is a bona fide spiritual master. And like Gurudev, just put me in his pocket. So it took me another week or so. We were in Mulumbar, but I went to Gurudev and I asked him to accept me as his disciple. And he said, very good. So I was looking after the cows, as I said, on the farm with Tapan Mishra Prabhu. And Tridani Maharaj, the temple president there, was quite a badmas, not a very nice person. He was smoking drugs and stuff, but somehow he had gone away, and Tridani Maharaj was the acting temple president. His name was Narad Muni at that time. So I went to him in the Mangalati, because Gurudev was going to Sydney the next day, and some devotees were driving to Sydney. It's quite a long drive. And I said, can I please go with my Gurudev? I just want to, he's telling Sadhu Sangha, I must hear Sadhu Sangha, Harikatha. So he said, okay, Maharaj is going there for 5 days. 5 days, you hear from him, you come back. I said, yes Prabhu, I'm coming back. And I left, and I kept going. Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth. I got money.
5 days of Indra Brahma.
I went to Bhubaneswar, and I never came back. And that's what happened.